Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. I'm excited to announce that I'm launching 2 new courses. Both courses will begin January 9th, and registration is now open on our website. You can go to the Leader U tab and click on Master Classes, and then you will see the options of Emotional Intelligence and Self-Leadership. In each of those tabs, you can learn more about each of those courses, what they will cover, what the expectations are, frequently asked questions, as well as what's the benefit to you and what's the benefit to your employer. I would love to have you join me on this journey. I look forward to enhancing and creating a life that you love in 2024. I hope to be a part of that. If you have any questions, send us an email at info@blackriverpm.com. Hello, and welcome to the Leader U podcast. I'm excited to introduce a friend of mine, James Ruchti. He was born and raised in Pocatello, Idaho, and he is a West Point graduate. He served as military intelligence officer in the United States Army from 1993 to 1998. His military service took him to Germany, Jordan, Kuwait, and throughout the United States. James graduated from the University of Idaho Law School in 2001. He worked as a law clerk for Federal District Court Judge Lynn Winmill prior to entering private practice. He and his law partner, Joel Beck, own a thriving plaintiffs practice in Pocatello, serving clients throughout southeast Idaho in personal injury, wrongful death, workers' compensation, and insurance claims. James served in the Idaho House from 2006 to 2010, including a term as the Assistant and Rules Committee and the Revenue and Taxation Committee. James was elected in the Idaho Senate in 2022. Is presently the Assistant Minority Leader and serves on the Judicial and Rules Committee, the Commerce Committee, and the State Affairs Committee. James is a past president of the Idaho Trial Lawyers Association. His wife, Wendy, who is amazing, has a Ph.D. in education and is a professor at Idaho State University, where she and Rob work together.
That's right.
James and Wendy have been married since 1993 and are the proud parents of 2 children, Spencer and Drew. I'm so excited to have you here today, James.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for quite some time, and our schedules just haven't really jived.
Right.
We're both traveling all over the place.
A little busy, yeah.
Yeah, traveling all over the place. But I want to start off and just... I'm here to have you on the podcast to talk about diplomacy as a leadership competency, and we define that as effectively and tactfully handling difficult or sensitive issues. I think that's a skill that I don't care if it's in your job or not. It's probably something that we could all learn a little bit and distill some wisdom from you. But let's start off with just, first of all, did you want to be an attorney and be in the Senate and things like?
Well, it was always something that I would come back to when you're young and trying to figure out what you want to do. You don't really know because you haven't done it. The only way to figure that out is to go out and do it. So I was in the military for 5 years after graduating from West Point. And so I had a lot of time to kind of figure that out. What do I want to do next? And I can remember coming up with a table, and it had, benefits of all these different careers and how I rated them. And I had all this time to think about it. I thought about being a public school teacher. I thought about getting an MBA. I thought about getting a master's in public administration. But being an attorney always attracted me. Mm-hmm. It was just where my skill sets were. It's where I felt comfortable, and I was right. Mm-hmm. I love being a trial attorney. Mm-hmm. I love everything we do. We negotiate. We get in front of judges and people, and we make our case. We tell them why we think we're right. We show them the evidence. We make the arguments. You get to work with people. It's a great job.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So What brought you into being an elected official?
I always had an interest in that as well. I enjoy history. I enjoy political history, especially. I know a lot about Idaho's political history. I recognize that politics is a way to get good things done, and it requires a lot of the same skills that you need to be a good trial attorney. You have to have people skills. You have to be persuasive. You have to be able to identify evidence. And so it was kind of a natural place for me to go to. I have, through West Point and the military, I came out of those two institutions with a lot of leadership knowledge and I hope skills. And that seemed like a natural place to put it so that I could help others in the community and the state.
I appreciate your service in the military as well as for our state and for your fights for education. I am a fan of anybody who fights for education.
Yeah, well, it can be a tough fight over there, especially now. There's a big push to create a voucher system, which would essentially create two public education systems. One that they're both going to be underfunded once you create them because they both have to be equally funded or will be equally funded.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about diplomacy and being sensitive to certain topics, I know there's a lot of struggle with that and with people and even people's trust in our political system right now, right? And a lot of us versus them, regardless of what side you're on. And I think I don't want to turn this into a political talk because I'm not highly political. I'm more interested in how do we get more impactful about listening to each other and trying to find out how we come together. Because I'm a person who kind of lives in the middle anyways.
Yeah.
I see things that on the Republican side, I see things on the Democratic side, and I value things on both sides. So I'm kind of a radical middleist.
Right. No, that actually is how I don't describe it in quite that way, and I like that way of describing it. But I think my reputation is as a centrist, somebody who's a moderate, looking for solutions to practical problems. I'm also very anti-extreme.
Yes.
Like I think whether it's far left, far right, it doesn't serve any of us well. And so this whole idea of diplomacy is kind of it's natural. You don't really have to be political to appreciate the importance of diplomacy. You use diplomacy all the time. I'll bet most people use it in their marriage. They use it when talking with their kids.
Right.
You just use it all the time because it's how you set the table to have tough conversations. It requires, in my opinion, one of the most important things is being open and honest. As soon as you lose somebody's faith in what you're saying, as soon as they find out there's another shoe to drop or that there's something you knew about that you didn't tell them, you've lost what you needed to have those tough conversations. You won't be able to have them in the future either with that person. So diplomacy starts with just being open and honest. And that's a good starting point.
Yeah. So we work with a lot of organizations, and from nonprofit to government to, you name it, mines, every industry. And one of the things that we see across all industries in every organization we've been with is that difficult conversations are one of the biggest challenges. People having that skill set.
Yeah.
And being able to have those without getting emotionally hijacked and not be able to actually finish the conversation, and it just becomes us versus them, or it just actually gets ignored, and then there's repercussions for not having the conversations too.
Yeah, I can see why those are persisting problems. Tough conversations, they're called tough conversations for a reason. I mean, you know that you're going to have to navigate it well. You can say the same two things or approach the same two subjects in a diplomatic way or a non-diplomatic way, and obviously the non-diplomatic way there's like 5 or 6 different ways it can go off the rails. But one of the things besides being open and honest, I think that it's important that you approach those conversations with empathy, with an understanding that, like let's say you're talking to somebody about a mistake that they've made, behavior they need to correct. If you come at it as being very critical, and that's all you're going to do is talk about the criticism, the bad behavior, that conversation is probably not going to go very well. On the other hand, if you sandwich it between a couple of compliments, if you talk about the bad behavior using a more passive voice, I think those conversations go a lot better. You can identify with them and the challenges they have, and explain that, I get the problem. I struggle with that too. Here's the challenge we have. So it's almost like you're talking about a third person doing the behavior, and that makes it a little easier to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Can you think of a time when you've had to do this recently? Have a difficult conversation using diplomacy, like most recently, maybe?
Yeah. Boy. Yeah. I've had to have conversations with clients. Obviously, I won't get into the details of them, but sometimes you have to share with a client where we do litigation. We're trial attorneys. So we're in court, we're having a dispute with another party, and you have to have conversations, or we do all the time, where we explain to the client where something they did is going to come up in trial. It is a problem. It was a screw up. And you have to get them comfortable with it pretty quickly, because it is a reality and it is going to be part of the case. And we aren't judgmental. That's not we don't see that as our focus or our role. In litigation, our role is to figure out, how do we talk about it? How do we address it? How do we respond to it? If you're running a business, and I own my own law practice with my law partner, those conversations, if you're having one with an employee, for example, it's really just a conversation about, hey, how do we improve performance? Because we're all on the same page. I mean, we love having you here. We want you here, but we got to fix these things, X, Y, and Z. Let's just come up with a plan and get this done.
So you're actually involving them. You said, let's come up with a plan.
Let's come up with a plan.
That is the difference. Then this is what you'll be doing. And I need you to be here, here, here. It's collaboration.
Yeah. And it has to be honest. I suspect sometimes when corporations get really big, they talk about solving the problem with the employee and they want to fix it, but really they put them on a plan to get them out of the company. Small businesses, I can only speak from my own experience, that's not what you're doing.
No.
The disruption to losing an employee is pretty heavy for a small business. So you're much better off if you just identify the problem, make sure the employee's on board with seeing it as a problem, and if not, explain to us why it's not. But once you're on the same page there, then it's just, hey, what can we do to fix it? What do you need from us? What sort of support? And then get a commitment and say, here's how we're going to measure whether you're accomplishing what we just decided we were going to do here. Yeah. We've done that and done it successfully. I mean, in fact, we had an employee once upon a time that we struggled with and went through that process, and boy, it worked like a charm. Yeah.
We do that in organizations too. Sometimes they'll say, this person, we need them to get some coaching. There's some skills that they're missing, but we really value them and we want to bring them along. We don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
And so, first thing is just finding out too if they're on board with that, because where their mindset is and where they're decided, if they really do want the growth, there's absolutely opportunity for them to grow and to get those skills and the support that they need. Because let's face it, all of us don't come to the workplace with all the skills we need for every job. And sometimes it's just needing some training. Sometimes it's needing a little bit of mentorship. Sometimes it's needing support. But oftentimes people don't know what they need. They're not good at it until they don't know they're underperforming either.
Right.
They've never been held accountable. They've never had the difficult conversations, and then all of a sudden they find out in their annual review.
Yeah, a lot of times I think very much as a supervisor, because I've always in the military and then owning my own business as a general, I've kind of been in a leadership position. I put most of the onus on the leaders for that. Because a lot of times what leaders do is they're really good at identifying the problem and finding who is the problem. They're less good at doing the follow-up, which is really the hard work.
Yeah, it is.
The training, the follow-up, getting them the resources, checking in to see how they're doing, having the follow-up conversation about, hey, it's now been a month and this is what we said you were going to do, but this is what you did. So you're still not quite there, but here's what you're doing well. Those are all time-consuming. It's not, you got other things I'm sure you got to do.
Yeah.
But that is what you need, and if you don't do it, then the employee reads something from that too, which is, I guess they're not that serious about it.
Yes. Yeah, and then the rest of the cultures, if you have a bigger organization, they start to see, and then it just cascades through that ripple effect. We use the term challenge and support, and kind of like a rubber band. So you're asking them to get to this productivity level. So you're providing a challenge, but you're also supporting them along the way. But if you stretch them too much, the rubber band will snap. And if you don't put enough tension on it, it's just going to fall off, right? So we have to be bringing people along with challenge and support. But I think you're using diplomacy in the way, it's more the way and the tone and the body language and the care for the person that is working for you that matters.
Yeah, the tone. And I can't emphasize enough how important the language is that you use.
Yes.
I mean, again, you can say it two different ways and it has two totally different meanings. And there is a way to talk to people. I mentioned using the passive voice, but the passive voice, if everybody remembers from English classes, just takes the actor out of the sentence, and so it just feels less threatening because you're not reminding the person, hey, you're the person who messed up here.
Yeah.
And I just think it makes a difference. It's not that you're giving them a pass or saying that they aren't responsible, but it's just a way of talking about it. I think makes it easier for them to hear.
Yeah. I think most people come to work or want to do good. They're often unaware. And research shows that it's actually 15% of people only 15% of people across all industries are actually self-aware, including attorneys, including higher ed, including, higher ed that one really cracked me up. But
it didn't surprise you, I bet.
It didn't surprise me, but we all think we're doing really well. And we actually rate ourselves better in our intelligence, in our looks, in our productivity in our jobs. So that's one of the reasons I think 360-degree evaluations are really important, because does what you think about yourself align with what everybody that works with you thinks?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a way we can check ourselves and find out how we're coming across, because we perceive ourselves one way, but when we're stressed, we're perceived different ways, right? We show up not the way we want to show up. And so I think we can use some tools of finding out, getting more information and more data for the case. For the case about, I do have some skills that I need to develop or things that I need to work on. And it's a lot easier when it comes on a piece of paper that you filled out and you answered. Nobody's, if you just that first step of becoming more self-aware. The second step and the harder step would be getting other people's opinion and seeing if it matches.
Yeah.
And that is a tool that I think really brings up self-awareness and just understanding, this is how you think you are, but this is how your team often perceives you. And you talked about that with this is where the team sees you. Sometimes the leader can do that, but when we're trying to develop them, they may not know a lot of things about themselves, right?
Yeah, and I could see why taking that self-assessment is an important first step, because it's not done in a public way. Nobody else is seeing the data. You're able to kind of make peace with that or recognize it in the quiet of your own office and come to terms with it. Yeah,
and sit in it for a little bit and marinate and just kind of be like, and not ruminate, not think about how you're bad or you're not good or you don't have this. None of that negativity, more just awareness. I think about it like stepping on a scale. Sometimes I don't really always want to get on the scale, but it's important that I do, or get your blood pressure checked, or get your blood work done. It's feedback.
It allows you to see it as an objective fact as opposed to somebody's opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And this is your own opinion of yourself. Now, if you want to get the other people's, we can do that too. But the first step would just be willing to like take a real look in the mirror. And, as it relates to diplomacy, what have been some things where a mirror's been held up for you where you're like, that didn't go as well as I thought, or...
Yeah, well, so when you're in the legislature, trying to get a bill passed is actually an extraordinarily heavy lift, extremely difficult. Even the simplest of bills can go askew if you aren't, really focused and paying attention to all the diplomacy that goes along with getting a bill passed. And what I mean by that is, in order to get a bill passed, as everybody knows, you have to get a majority in the House, which means you got to have 36 votes if everybody's there. You got to get a majority in the Senate in the state of Idaho, and there's 35 members there, so it means you need 16 if all 35 of us are on the floor. And the governor has to be willing to sign it. If he doesn't, he vetoes it, then there's a different process. But and in order to get through each house, you got to start out in a committee. And, you can identify the number of people on that committee, who they are. You need a majority from that committee just to get it on the floor. So all along the way, you're having to convince a certain number of people throughout the process that they should go along with this idea you have. And you've got to be honest about that. People are going to, when they're asking you questions, they have limited time because we go through so many bills, which means you got to make sure that you let them know what the detractors are going to say. Sure, you can put your own spin on it, but you got to be honest about what the problems are with your bill, or what at least some people perceive as problems with your bill. So all along the way, you're having to use diplomacy. You're having to, find the time and have good conversations, make sure questions are answered, that you seem open and available to them, so that they don't misread stuff or misread something about what you're saying or not saying. So diplomacy is a vital part of everything we do in the legislature.
Can you think of a time when it's just the diplomacy went out the window? Yeah,
we had a bill, and it had to do with insurance and underinsured motorist coverage, and it's been a burr under my saddle for a long time, because I feel like the way insurance companies, auto insurance, sell this product is just not the way they sell it, but the way they apply it isn't fair to the consumer. We've been working on the bill for a long time, and we failed to go talk to the business community and make sure they understood that this change wasn't going to be a threat to them or cause them to pay increased premiums. We were so busy with all the other pieces, we missed it. And that came back to bite us, because we didn't spend the time doing the diplomacy with business leaders.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. And anytime you're going to, bring on change, you're asking to bring on change, there's that emotional friction, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's something that leaders often, they think about putting more, they have a fuel-based mindset about, let's just sell the idea, and they forget about the other side, all the friction that comes along and in the idea of bringing change. And so as it relates to that, I'm thinking, how do you bring change, more change, and make it easier and reduce that friction by using diplomacy?
Yeah, here's one thing that I think you can do. You have to be empathetic as you think about how change is going to affect people. And you have to get rid of preconceived notions. So I'll give you one example. I mentioned earlier that one of the big pushes this year, last session, and will be again this session, is to create a voucher system within our public education system. And so when you think about that, I think immediately, at least I'm against the voucher system. big proponent of making sure that our public education dollars are spent on public education, that they're accountable for those dollars, that we know what the results are we want, and that those results are measurable. And when you create a voucher system, you're sending money to private schools, religious schools, and home schools, and there's no accountability system. And so immediately when I started thinking about this, we assumed that it was going to be public education system, our current public education system, including charter schools, against private schools, religious schools, and home schools. I failed to appreciate that homeschoolers and possibly religious and private schools may not like the idea of vouchers, even though they would be getting money, but because eventually the public is going to demand accountability. I mean, eventually that's just what happens.
Yeah.
Taxpayers see their money going somewhere. They eventually, if they're not seeing the results they want, they're going to say, tell us, or set up accountability. And homeschoolers decided, they started writing legislators saying, we don't want to get any voucher money because we know that's what's going to happen eventually.
Yeah. Interesting.
So you just have to think broadly and be appreciative that people have different, concerns, and try to get past your own prejudices about what those might be. In other words, get rid of your preconceived notions.
That's hard. I mean,
That's
we all
really
have,
hard.
and we all have unconscious biases that we're unaware of, right? So
Yeah.
unconscious, right? So, and some of the research I've been reading recently is that people actually think that they're, no matter even if they're doing something as bad as genocide, they think they're doing the right thing. Like, we have this ability to think other people are wrong,
All right.
but we're fighting for justice. So no matter what, even if it comes down to traffic up all the way up to genocide, they still believe they're fighting the good fight. So if we all think we're doing the right thing and we're fighting this good versus evil, and the other side, we believe our own stuff.
Right, yeah.
And that's one of the biggest challenges, is actually being able to check ourselves and say, like, how do we even come to this agreement that this is the right or the wrong thing? Because we have this tendency as humans to think what we're doing is the right thing.
Yeah. No, we do.
And
I see that all the time.
Right. And even if you're espousing values, but you're not living them, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all have this ability to say things, but do we actually live up to them? And I think we all have moral hypocrisy in some form, and it's really kind of looking at yourself and finding out where yours are, and instead of everybody else. But
Yeah.
it's easier to blame, it's easier to point the finger, it's easier to do that than to look inward. And I don't know how that we fix that, but diplomacy, I think the kindness and the compassion that we show, and asking people to look within instead of just be judgmental, because that's where we've gone.
Yeah.
To judgmental over curiosity.
It's one of my leadership principles: take responsibility for your own actions. I learned it when I first got back to West Point. One of the first things they do when you get off the bus is they teach you your 4 responses. So it's yes, sir, no, excuse, sir, and sir, I do not understand. And your first year, I mean, I won't suggest that that's all they ever let you say.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, when you're asked a question as a plebe, a first-year student at West Point, those are the 4 responses you have available to you. Yes, sir, no, sir, sir, I do not understand. Those are kind of self-explanatory. The one that was most impactful to me was the no excuse, sir. Because as a 18-year-old kid from Pocatello, teenagers, young people,
That's all they're full of.
yeah, you're used to being able to blame it on somebody else,
Yeah.
or give an excuse. Why are you late? Well, somebody was going too slow and I couldn't get out to formation. No, that's not an excuse. So the answer was no excuse. And eventually you said that so many times, you started to internalize it, that, hey, there's always a way to have avoided that problem. And I've used that in my political life. I've used it in my law practice as a small business owner. I always look inwardly. I don't blame. I don't point the finger. at employees. I certainly don't blame them in front of others. I take responsibility for my own actions and for the actions of my office. I just think it's an extremely important leadership principle. It's important for a number of reasons. One, because it forces you to be introspective and figure out how to solve problems so they don't happen again. But it sends a message to your employees or to those who are following you that you're in charge and you're taking responsibility, and I'll take the heat for something you did, or at least that maybe you could have done a little better. I'm not going to point the finger at you, humiliate you. That's not how I operate. I'm taking responsibility. And I've found that what happens is they're so appreciative of it that they bend over backwards to make sure it doesn't happen again, because they don't like seeing me take the heat.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good, because they respect you. And I think I was actually working with an organization yesterday, and one of the leaders said to me, I have a supervisor that one of the things that she does that drives me crazy, and I'm having these conversations with her, is she throws her employees under the bus. As soon as something happens, she goes, and he happened to be an ex-ISU football player, and he said, that's one of the things that your coaches do, is they take the heat. They take the heat when your player didn't lace up his stuff, he wasn't wearing the right, that coach takes the heat and then has a separate conversation with them about, this is what's going on. But just throwing your people under the bus because you're not willing to be accountable, this is a huge problem. And this is one of the two that Rob and I see across organizations, is the accountability and difficult conversations. It comes back to that again. If there's a really good book, Extreme Accountability, or Extreme Ownership. That's a military, a Navy SEAL who wrote that book. I forget his name, but yeah, I think. Yeah, we live in a culture of blame, and it's just easier to do that than to take accountability.
I think it's a short-term way of protecting yourself. So a lot of people think short-term when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
How do I get something to happen immediately? But that's really not how leadership works. Leadership's about building culture. It's about creating force multipliers within your organization. And that takes time. It's long game stuff. So it's, taking responsibility for that thing that, yes, okay, the employee did it wrong, but it's your responsibility. The buck stops here. So that's where it's stopping. And then praising in public when they've done something well, and then having those tough conversations in private where other people don't know about it. All of those things are a way of getting people in your organization to grow and be better at what they do, and that in turn makes your organization more effective, puts less work on the leader. The leader has to do less because everybody else is rowing in the same direction with them.
I have a few women that are ready to run for office, and what tips would you have for women or anyone in general, but that you wish you would have known earlier, as far as skills that you think you better do this?
Well, I suppose some of it depends on what type of office they want to run for, whether it's school board or city council. Yeah, city council. A lot of that is just figuring out how the city runs, or figuring out how the school board runs, or if you're running for the state legislature, having a general idea as to how that operates. Attending meetings. So, for example, city meetings, part of understanding how it operates is going to meetings and appreciating the importance of those meetings. But I would say the most important thing about being an elected official is just being open to conversations with people, trying to see different perspectives. And, inevitably you got to figure out how to run an election, how to run a race. And a lot of people think they know how to do it, but until you actually have to do it, it's a lot harder than people think. And it's not as simple as just putting your name on a ballot. A lot of hard work. It's not rocket science, but it does require time, money, and lots of effort.
Yeah. So what are some of the skills that you think, like, not just the running, but like once let's say they get into office, what would you think would be some of the top skills if you were just to look at that list of things that you're like, you better be good at conflict management, you better be good at hard conversations, right? Like,
Yeah, being an elected official requires a lot of teamwork and planning and organizing. And, because most of our elected official positions, they're not full-time positions, they're part-time positions. And if you're like me, I have my own law practice with my law partner. We work on we have lots of deadlines as trial attorneys. And I have to balance all those things with, meetings, legislative meetings, or just meetings in the community. So planning and organizing is a really big challenge, and problem solving, being able to identify the problem, being able to identify potential solutions, and then appreciating, even if you find the best solution, that doesn't mean it's the one that's going to, get passed, because you have to figure out what solution will garner the most support or the necessary support to get it passed. Those are two different things, and they can be, it can make it really challenging.
yeah, those are great tips. What if you were, just a young person wanting to be a leader, and you didn't have any experience with leadership, like going to West Point or being in the military or anything like that? What would you dive into to really gain some skills that that you needed or you learned just because you went through those types of
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I know being in the military just isn't for everybody, but the great thing about the military is you get real-world experience from the get-go. Like your entire time in the military, you are watching people lead. You're watching good examples and bad examples, but regardless, you're learning from it, or should be. And these are people that are taught leadership. So again, they may not be implementing those leadership principles that they're taught very well, but most of them do, and most of them take it very seriously. And they have leadership programs. If you're going to become a non-commissioned officer, they send you to school. They teach you these leadership skills. Officers get the same sort of training. So but I get that's not for everybody. But there are other programs. There's some great podcasts out there. But the only way you truly learn leadership is to implement it. So you got to get involved in organizations where they're willing to give you a chance. That doesn't mean you have to be the president of the organization, but whatever role you play, be a doer, get stuff done. Take small things off the plate. I heard President Obama mention once that you didn't have to have some really important position, but if you were the person who raised their hand and said, "I can take care of that for you," and you just did that consistently, people will notice. And as they notice, they start to give you more and more responsibility and give you more opportunities to exercise leadership. So just be somebody who contributes to the organization, whatever organization that is.
Or being on someone's board. That's another thing. I think that's another opportunity to gain leadership and maybe even asking for help.
Yeah, and the Chamber of Commerce here has a leadership program that they do. So there are different ways to learn academically what all that is. And I think that's important to really think about leadership and leadership principles, read books about leadership and leadership principles. But being academically proficient in what it means to be a leader is not enough. You gotta practice it. You gotta find ways that give you opportunities to practice it.
Absolutely, because reading in a book is, and we have great leadership programs here, and my husband happens to have one of the great programs at ISU on leadership and human behavior. But I think you're right, and I've done leadership Pocatello, and I think that was one of the best experiences that I had moving to a new area just to kind of find out what this community is about and learn more about it. And also, it's long enough that you meet really good leaders, really poor ones, all the things that you said, where you're learning about what you want to be, what you don't want to be, and not only that, you are connecting with people over a long period of time. So you're actually building relationships, and it's not so much of a networking type thing. It's more about really finding some of those people that you want ask questions of, and you want mentors. And that's kind of a passion that Rob and I have, is just to help these younger leaders, because they are our future, is to help the younger leaders with the skill gap and the confidence gap that they may have. And there's not a lot of opportunities in this neck of the woods for them. And so I'm just really trying to kind of help bridge that gap.
Yeah. Well, every organization needs leadership.
Yeah.
So when I first got done with my clerkship, I had started thinking about getting involved in politics, and the Bannock County Democrats their chair was getting ready to leave, and I saw that opportunity and took it. Now, I was probably a little young to be the chair at the time, but I had really great people around me who were committed to making sure I didn't fail it or fall on my face and look bad. And so I lucked out in that regard. But you have to take those opportunities and just have the confidence in yourself. Yes, there are things maybe you shouldn't try because you're not quite prepared for it. But there's also times where I think people are too timid about taking the chance. They're just too, and you have to be willing to take risks, take chances in order to grow. Yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation. I think there's a lot in here about diplomacy, leadership, just asking for help, humility, kindness, compassion. I mean, we've covered a lot of topics, and I'm appreciative of your time to really serve our community, serve our state, and I know it's not an easy job. I mean,
no, it's not. It's not. Most people think it's tough for a reason that doesn't bother me as much. Like most people think because of the kind of the rough and tumble nature of it, and how heated some of these issues can become, and how frustrating they can become. We have our legislature has swung to the extreme, and so a lot of people think that that's why it would be tough. That stuff doesn't bother me. I'm kind of comfortable in that space of conflict, and I can exist there without having fights and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a demanding job but a fun one and a rewarding one.
Rewarding one. What is the biggest reward that you get from it?
Oh, once in a while, you can tell something that you have worked on, something you have said, something you have promoted or fought against really has a personal impact for somebody in the community. Never would have known it, and they come up to you and talk to you about it. Knowing that you can have a personal impact while working on something that is really intended for the greater good makes it worth it.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your service, and I'm just glad that we have such amazing people like you in our community that fight for good and fight for justice and really do care about people.
Thanks, Angie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. And thank you for listening to the Leader U podcast. If you feel like you could use some diplomacy skills, this is a great podcast. Please share it. Please watch it with your team. See if there's ways that you can utilize some of these skills and have a discussion about ways to improve the diplomacy in your organization and just as future leaders.
Leone's EQ course has been enlightening and eye-opening. I've really enjoyed Angie's unique perspective and her ability to put things in a way that I can use emotional intelligence on the day-to-day. The coursework has been educational and really enjoyable. I find myself looking forward to each coaching call and the coursework as it comes along. It's been very educational without being overwhelming. I've been able to utilize it in the day-to-day workplace as well as in my personal relationships, and I really, really enjoy being able to grow in the emotional intelligence space.